what are companies promising to their users? They sort of promise this like way of feeling like at ease, productive. The important thing I think for brands is to figure out what that feeling is and do everything in your power never to break it.
Hi everyone, you're listening to Scaling DevTools. I'm joined today by Dani Grant, who is the co-founder and CEO of Jam.dev. And Jam is a bug reporting tool that developers don't hate. Dani, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks so much for having me.
Could you tell us a bit more about Jam? And actually, before that, I want to say, like, you've just been completely blowing up on my Twitter feed recently, and I hadn't really come across Jam until fairly recently, and you've just exploded. And so I'm super excited to kind of dig in. But could you tell us a bit about Jam?
That's so amazing to hear. Jam is like a flight recorder for web application bugs. So when the product manager or the QA tester is like checking out staging and something goes wrong, they just click on the Jam extension and it copies to their clipboard a link they can share with engineers that has everything the engineer needs to debug. It has the last 30 seconds of the DOM played back like a video. It has everything that's in DevTools, like console logs, network requests, the timing waterfall, the stack trace. It has all of the session metadata and even things like user ID. So the engineer just opens up this link and they've got like the perfect re-recording of the bug. They don't have to ask any follow-up questions. They don't have to hop on a screen share. The reason why we built this is because when my co-founder and I were product managers at Cloudflare, we were trying to move really, really fast and we were trying to ship really cool new things. Like both of us got to be product managers on Cloudflare Workers, on their DNS Resolver 1.1.1.1. And instead of spending our time unblocking engineers, we were just spending our time chasing down engineers, trying to show them let me show you this is a real problem that users are having. And engineers not being able to reproduce stuff is super frustrating for them and wastes their whole day. And so you move slower as a team, you do less, and it just kind of sucks. And so there's no tool that helps the non-engineers speak to engineering and show them what's happening in software. And so we had to build the tool ourselves, and that is Jam. And so fast forward to today, there are 100,000 people who use Jam.
Wow, that's more than when I saw your... I felt like I saw 80,000, so you've grown.
Oh, yeah. They're at thousands of AI startups, but also at the Fortune 100s. It's like Salesforce and Nike.
Wow.
And yeah, it's been an exciting time.
Wow. So people using Salesforce can expect big improvements.
All the bugs should be fixed.
Okay. Great. This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. At some point, you're going to land a big customer and they're going to ask you for enterprise features. That's where WorkOS comes in because they give you these features out the box. Features like skim provisioning, SAML authentication, and audit logs. They have an easy-to-use API, and they're trusted by big dev tools like Vercel, as well as smaller, fast-growing dev tools like Knock. So if you're looking to cross the enterprise chasm and make yourself enterprise-ready, check out WorkOS. We've also done an episode with Michael, the founder of WorkOS, where he shares a lot of tips around crossing the enterprise chasm, landing your first enterprise deals, and making sure that you're ready for them. Thanks, WorkOS, for sponsoring the podcast, and back to the show. Yeah, one of the things so there's a great demo that everyone should go see on the Chrome store, and there's Bob Marley's soundtrack in the background. And the thing I was amazed by was you can actually see the session before the bug occurred, even if you weren't planning on if you weren't debugging, which I thought was really cool. So yeah, it feels like things have just exploded recently, from my perspective on the outside. So what do you think is that how it feels on the inside as well? Or have I just been in a random corner of the internet?
It's so amazing to hear that. That's really, really cool. We live in the coolest time in history because what software means is that one individual or a small group of individuals can have impact to change the world. Software brings down the bar to make worldwide impact. And I know that sounds a little cheesy, but I don't think it's wrong. I think that's right. Like, if you think about who made education free to the world, it's YouTube and TikTok. It's like these like small and mighty engineering teams at one time. And now, no, they're big teams, but like they really do change the world. And so giving back engineers time where they're not spent like trying to communicate with their PMs or like chase down debugging details means that they can spend more time building new features and build like the future. I mean, it literally means progress can happen faster in the world. So it's really, really cool. And so we really care that we can help more and more people. What's cool about being a founder of a tool that spreads through usage, like it's like product-led growth. It's like the more you use the tool, the more the tool grows because other people see the tool in like Jira tickets and like you're sharing bugs with engineers and the engineers know about it. They ask other PMs to use it. Like basically if we just work on product and trying to make as the most valuable product as possible, more and more people use it. And the more people who use it, the faster it grows. And so it has been growing really fast recently. And it's cool to hear that even from the outside, it feels like an inflection point because on the inside, it feels really exciting.
Yeah. And do you think there was any like big change in how you did things? Or was it like a kind of compounding or?
Yeah, it's so... one of the hardest parts of building a startup is right at the very beginning. How do you know if something's working? Because oftentimes things work a little bit. And you're like, is this working a little bit or is it working a lot? But when the numbers are small, it's really hard to tell. So like our user base doubles every 3 months. And when it doubled from 1,000 users to 2,000 users in 3 months, like it was honestly a little hard to notice. But when it doubled from 10,000 to 20,000, we were like, oh, that's quite interesting. Or 50 to 100. Like that's,
That's interesting.
We're like, okay, something here is working. And so there was no like inflection point. But I think it's just the nature of virality.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know you've spoken, so shout out to DevTools FM. You spoke a lot about like kind of how you pivoted 7 times. You had 7 iterations and then there was like one more was the final form. And I think I'm going to give a very brief summary so people should listen to that episode as well. But from what I took away from it was that you felt very much like you were pushed to do like iteration, but then actually, you know what, Guy, can I ask you to explain that? Because I think I've done a terrible job.
The company's almost 4 years old. Like I started with my co-founder when I was 26 and now I'm 30. Like it's been like, that's like a huge part of life, Yeah. It's been an amazing journey. In the first 2 years, so we started it to solve a problem that we had faced ourselves as product managers. And we really cared about solving it, but we didn't know what a product should look like that solves this like very human communication problem. The first thing we did when we started the company is we did 45 user interviews, like just out of the gate, which is like very like product manager takes on startup, like let's talk to some users. But what we heard on those calls, people were they were so frustrated. There was so much emotion in these calls that we knew we hit a nerve. And I even remember like one of these early user interviews, the guy tried to sign up his whole team and pay us and schedule an onboarding. And we're like, there's no product yet. Like we're just at the beginning. One of the earliest user interviews is this really incredible designer named Jeff Anders, who so resonated with the problem that he was like, can I contribute in some way? And he made us our logo and our whole brand colors and fonts and everything
really?
that we still use today. Like, it was just amazing. So we thought like, oh, we figured it out. Like people are so excited. All we have to do is build and launch and the rest will be history. So we built and we launched on Product Hunt and like lots of people signed up and then no one kept using it.
Interesting.
And we're like, well, that sucks. Let's try it again. And so we made some changes based on some feedback. We launched again. And again, lots of people signed up and then no one used it. And basically that was the story of the company for almost 2 years. The first 18 months of the company, we just kept launching and launching and launching. We launched 7 different flavors of Jam, all different like ways to solve this problem around PM to engineer communication and like streamlining it around bugs and fixes. And you know, none of them worked. And then suddenly when we shipped the 8th, it did.
And yeah, I guess that's going to be your explainer, but like what is not working versus working?
So think to like, okay, we're a quarter of the way through 2024. You've probably tried a lot of new products in 2024. Like, yeah?
Yeah.
How many of them have you stuck with and kept using as part of your weekly workflow?
Yeah, a lot less.
Is it even one?
It probably is one,
Okay.
for sure. But yeah, I think I tried like 2 or 3 different video editors this week just for like subtitles, and yeah, that not stuck with any of them. So yeah.
The bar is so freaking high to actually get someone to use something new because they have to change their behavior. They're taking a risk. Like, and so the difference between something working and not working is that it's just retention. Are people checking this out? Is it interesting to them? Or does it become part of their core weekly workflow? And the reason why we knew the 8th version was working is because we just tracked one metric, which was retention. And what we saw was like streaks. People were using it every single week. And that felt different.
Yeah, that's so interesting. The guys from Digger.dev came on recently, and they kind of basically said the same thing of like, they would get like Hacker News stuff and people would say, oh, this is really cool. And they'd like kick the tires, but no one would ever come back on their early iterations.
One of the really helpful things as a founder is to sort of break down problems into sub-problems, because then you can sort of just tackle one at a time. Because my startup isn't working is too big of a problem to solve, right?
Yeah.
But if you're getting signups and interest, you know you've hit on something that has problem market fit. There is a problem in the market and people are willing to go out of their way to try something. So that's great, right? You solved that problem. Now the only question is, can you get to product market fit, where the product solves the problem in such a way that people want to use it every week? And so it's actually really validating that you should keep going when you have problem market fit, because it means that once you figure out the product, people will, like, there are a lot of people who are going to be coming in to use it. There's this really awesome chart in Lenny's newsletter where he shows kind of the most popular new software company, like from the last 10 years, most popular software companies, and then how many years it took them to get to product market fit. Like Notion, love Notion. I'm a super fan of Notion. It took them 3 years to get to product market fit. Figma in that chart is like the last row took 5. And these are these amazingly, like these smashing successful companies. But what it shows is that it takes a really long time to figure out a new product that people are willing to adopt and use every week. And if founders feel the problem market fit, they should just keep going because the payoff is big if you can give it enough time.
Okay, weird question.
Great.
Sorry, yeah, it's related. So imagine you knew what you knew now and you had to build like the product that would get product market fit. Like, could you do it in like an insanely short amount of time?
It's a really interesting question. Look, the best shortcut to product market fit, if you're the type of founder that just doesn't want to like iterate through the desert, is you do something that already exists and you just do it a little bit better. So here's an example, like Linear. There's been so many like issue trackers. Issue trackers have product market fit. We know that companies use issue trackers, but they did it better. The execution was faster, better designed, more ergonomic. And so that's like a shortcut to product market fit. You don't have to invent something new. You just do it better. Like if you wanted to build a better sales force, you don't have to do the winding road to product market fit. You just do it. So I think that's one shortcut. But one thing that I've seen now over and over again, it's very humbling for me, is when I meet other founders where their last company is one of the companies that I look up to. It's like inspiring, smashing success, incredible product, incredible vision, incredible team. And they're starting over and they have to do the same process that every founder does, which is iterate for years. That's like very humbling. And I just think that that's the process. That's why it's hard to start a company, because the beginning is kind of murky and not that fun.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. But just like getting kind of I don't know if it's philosophical, but like, in a sense, like, let's say someone comes along and they're like, all right, I'm going to start Jello.dev and I'm going to just copy you exactly and feature for feature, just do exactly what you do. I feel like this is it. Part of it's like the journey that you went on and the kind of the story that you tell, and that I kind of come to the website like trusting that you're obsessed with finding the best way of capturing bugs. And I'm just going to assume that you're better than Jello.dev because they started like yesterday and they've just copied you, sort of thing. How much of that plays into it?
A lot of times, especially like people with my background, which is like product versus go to market. Like I come from the product world and now doing the startup thing. So when people come from this world, often we think of companies as their products, right? And then when you start the company, people like tell you this weird thing. They tell you like company is more than your product. Like a company is your go-to-market and your brand and like, you know, it's your value. It's like all these other things. And you're like, yeah. But like mostly it's product, right?
Yeah. It's features. Go
on. But over time, I've seen that that's actually kind of missing the point. Where we've seen companies that their products are pretty much similar, but the companies are in sort of different markets. Like the easy example here is like Uber and Lyft. Different types of people use Uber and Lyft, or like maybe the same, and it's just whatever, race to the bottom. Or maybe a better example would be like, Datadog versus Sentry, where the product in some of their product categories are very similar, but their go-to-market and their messaging and their brand is different. So like Sentry is the product that an individual developer signs up for, puts in a credit card and goes. Datadog is doing a top-down motion. They're going to be at whatever enterprise conference. They're sending out cold emails. Like they've just got a different motion. And so oftentimes like even like if you copy the product, you might not copy the other things. The company is sort of more than... Anyway, hopefully that resonates.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. I feel like it really is. And I think the founder of Sentry, I don't know if you saw, but he wrote about brand quite recently and about like they've just obsessed over brand and they've invested really heavily in brand. And that's like their thing, which you don't hear that. I at least didn't hear that much among most of the people that I've spoken to, at least.
They crush it though. Like whoever is doing copywriting in like the Sentry designs are like, they are amazing. When you wait for the Sentry dashboard to load, it says loading an absurd amount of JavaScript. And it's like, good.
Yeah. So it kind of branching from that, like, how do you think about the brand of Jam?
Look, no developer says like, you know, what I really love about software engineering is when stuff goes wrong and I have to fix it. Like no developer has ever said, I wish I could spend more of my time fixing bugs.
Yeah. I wish I could get more stressful texts from my boss on Slack at like saying, wait, I thought we fixed this one.
I really like it when the company like types in the dev Slack channel, something is broken. And so the moment that people use our product is not their favorite moment in their jobs. And so our job is to get out of their way, make things fast, make things simple, and keep things light. And that really informs the brand. Similarly, so that's on the engineering side, but also for the person reporting the bug. That person was busy doing something else when they notice something going wrong, and it's kind of a freak out moment. How did it happen? Like they're busy. Like in that moment, we want them to feel in control and we want them to feel like less cognitive load. They don't have to switch context. And so that also informs the brand. It's like keep things easy, simple, dead simple. And so I see the brand as this like utility. But beyond that, I also think of brands as like, what are companies promising to their users? And they sort of promise this like way of feeling like at ease, productive, like in control. But they deliver that brand, they deliver that promise by making you feel that way every single time. And if one time they don't make you feel that way, you kind of feel betrayed. It sort of breaks the brand. Like Apple makes me feel high quality. Like Apple makes me feel like pristine design around nice things.
Yeah.
If one day they deliver an ugly phone or like whatever, like they kind of broke the trust there. And so the important thing I think for brands, especially for startups like ours, is to figure out what that feeling is and do everything in your power never to break it.
And what kind of things do you do to make sure you never break it?
The first thing is to identify, right? Like, have you ever watched a TV show where the first season is perfect and then they ruin it in the second season because they misunderstood what was good about the show?
Yeah. So
it's like, times. It's a really funny show. And then the second season is like the super drama. And you're like, you did not understand what was good here. So you have to put it into words. For us, it's like, it's just the words I just used, right? It's like dead simple, easy, fast. So once you have the words, then you just evaluate everything you do internally against those words. So for example, when we are looking at a design and it's like, is this ready to be implemented? We ask, could we make this even more dead simple? Could we make this feel easier? Could we make this feel faster? And so that's like just the guiding questions and conversation within the company.
That makes sense. I think Zeno from Resend says like similar kind of thing of like having that before you put it out there. I kind of asked them the same thing. Like, how do you know when it's like, okay, yes, this is simple. Like when it's like this kind of like spectrum, broad questions, like, is it simple enough? Or like, is it?
You don't know until you see a user use it over a screen share and then you see them do
they get closer.
Okay, then you know.
For the podcast listeners, Dani went very close to her screen as she said that.
But you can make some guesses. Like over time, we've learned a couple of patterns that are really confusing to users and a couple of patterns that keep things dead simple and easy. Like, for example, something that's really popular right now in UIs is to do sort of like alternatives to standard web components, like making your buttons more square, for example. But that puts like cognitive load on the user because they've never seen a button like that, or maybe very few times. And so they have to kind of think about it. And so it doesn't feel dead simple. And actually, if you just use the standard button that like is a material UI, everyone knows where to click. Or another one is, a lot of pro tools use a lot of icons. And that makes sense because in a pro tool, you spend a lot of time learning the tool, you become an expert, and then it's all about like speed. And if you can have all the icons right there, then you have all your functionality right there. But if you're trying to keep things dead simple in a moment of panic when there's a bug, you actually probably want to show people the words, and it's all verbs, right? It's like, take a screenshot, share your last minute. And you don't want to just have the icon. You want to make it easy for the brain to know they're clicking on the right thing. So anyways, we've like identified some patterns that help us like just sort of as guides.
Yeah, that makes sense. So like patterns, and then you also combine that with like just seeing how people use it. And that makes sense. Actually, another question I wanted to ask you is like, we touched on in the beginning that it's kind of, you've had quite a bit of growth recently. And how do you decide like what to do now that I'm imagining that you get pulled in more directions than you were previously when you had, like now with 100,000 users, you probably get pulled in more directions than when you had 1,000, for instance.
Okay. It's so interesting. I thought that would be the case because as a PM at Cloudflare, your users ask you for the whole gamut of things. But in a startup, usually there's like the next logical thing to build and everyone asks for it at the same time. So every week I email the top 100 users from the week before and I ask them, how's everything going? What do you want to see next?
So that feels like a big thing. So every week you email the top 100 users?
Yes.
Like manually or like you're just...
No, I have, there's a little bit of manual work here, but there's basically, I just like have a script to grab those users and then put them into an email tool. And the email is like, hey, just checking in, how's everything going? What would you like to see? And then it's me in every response. Yeah.
Yeah. And people respond.
Yeah, which is cool. I mean,
That's
it's
really
the top 100 users from the week before, right?
Yeah.
So people who have just done a bug bash or like, like it's relevant. They have something to share.
Yeah. Wow.
But the thing that's interesting is most people ask for the same thing. We get like the same 2 or 3 feature requests at a time. And then once we do one of them, like it's launched, then it just gets replaced with another thing. There's just always sort of like when you're working on a new product until it gets to this like place of maturity, there's just an obvious next thing to add that everyone is like, why don't you have this one thing?
Okay. So, and do you spend a lot of, is that primarily your time is just kind of making sure that you build those things?
Product is really, really important. It is life or death for a startup. It's also one of those things where it's like in startups, you work really hard and you may as well make sure that what you're spending so much time doing and like making other sacrifices for is something that'd be valuable to other people. Otherwise, it kind of seems like what a waste of time. And so it's just really, really important to us to be close to our users. What ends up happening is users respond. We have all sorts of user communication channels. All of this information goes into a Slack channel internally called Users Say the Darndest Things, where then we all as a team, we like discuss in the thread, like how to improve things for users. Sometimes it'll be like, oh my God, that's a quick fix. I'm on it. Or like, yeah, obviously that should be this, like, let me change that. And sometimes like, oh, that's a project. We should do this soon. But that's sort of where like feedback becomes action. But because the whole company is involved in like all the insightful user feedback that users are like so generous in giving us, it feels quite obvious to everyone. Like, oh, we just get so many requests for blank. Like, obviously we should just build this next. So it's not like corralling sheep or anything. It's not like I have to make sure that we build. It's like everyone is just on the same page. Like we are all focused on this.
Yeah, that makes sense. And most founders probably haven't worked in product at Cloudflare and, got that background. Like, do you think there's things that work quite well for you that maybe other founders wouldn't know to do on the product side there?
Cloudflare is such an amazing company. There are a few things that I think we learned there that like I aspire to do. I mean, it's just like an incredible organization. Cloudflare is a very audacious company. They always ask, could we be more audacious? Like Cloudflare made, TLS free for the web for the first time ever. It's like, not only did they launch the ability to like self-serve, get a cert, but like, then they made it free. They're always like, could we be thinking bigger? And so, I mean, I really aspire to that, but I think that's one thing, like just seeing, really inspired me. And maybe if you've not worked there, like that's one thing I would pass on. The other thing that Cloudflare does really, really well is in companies, different things are rewarded. At Cloudflare, the best thing you can do is ship. You can get something out to users, and that is awesome. It's just like velocity. It's all about like getting stuff into users' hands, and I think that is really, really important. And so we try to do that as well. Maybe the last thing that we learned at Cloudflare that is not obvious, and now we follow it at Jam, is Cloudflare, when they built net new greenfield stuff, like Cloudflare Workers, stuff that like they've never done before. There's not really anything like this out there. They build it in a very particular step-by-step way, where the first thing they build a proof of concept that is built to be deleted. But basically having something you can use really quickly is such a great starting point for, should we actually build this? What should it be like? It answers so many questions. But if you spend too long trying just to get to that initial proof of concept, like it's a lot of wasted time. But if you also build a V1 too quickly, then you're going to have like a messy code base as the foundation for a future huge project. And so they do this like proof of concept super fast. It's just for everyone internally to try. It gives us so much intel, and then it gets discarded. The other thing that's in this like step-by-step is once they get to like, here's the thing we want to ship, no external person uses it until it's good enough for the Cloudflare internal team. And there's so much iteration and learning that happens in this dogfooding step. We do it now at Jam. It changes the game for us because that feedback loop is so fast. And if it's not good enough for us, how dare we think it's good enough for someone else, right? And so it's aligned with our users. It's aligned with how we like to build. It's like fast iteration. So that maybe that's also one that like we learned there, and I think everyone should use.
That's amazing. So firstly, you would build it and then test it internally and then delete it or like discard it.
Yeah, it's the duct tape thing.
Yeah. And then start from scratch, build it properly, get it working and used internally.
Yep.
And then put it out.
Yep. And then you put it out into beta first, and then you put it out for general access. So there's still also like a testing step with users.
That's really cool. That's really, really cool. And is there often where you kind of build these like audacious, you're doing stuff with AI now, I guess, right? Like you've started doing like.
Yeah.
Whoa, we got it in. I got your buzzword in. It's the AI stuff you're building. That's pretty new. So I guess you're trying to follow the Cloudflare path there.
I mean, gosh, you just see this stuff and you're like, obviously the future of debugging is AI powered. Mm-hmm. Like, obviously we don't want engineers spending all their time fixing bugs. We want engineers building new stuff. Like basically it's the most exciting thing happening right now, right? It's like engineers getting more time to be inventive and creative and generative versus like debugging, crawling through the code base, searching. Like actually AI is really good at that. But like building the future is like totally for humans. And so that is really, really exciting. One of the interesting challenges is, look, we always want to build trust with our users. And part of building trust is things should work every time. Because imagine you use something like as a utility and 1 out of 10 times it doesn't work right. You can actually never trust it because you don't know if it's going to work. And so that's kind of the thing with AI right now is, so we're following these steps right now. We're doing like the proof of concept. Is it good enough for us? We're having AI solve our own bugs. And it's okay. But it doesn't get it right every time. And it means that engineers can't trust it. And it's like, so we've created more work for engineers to like check the AI's work. And then like some bugs are easy to fix. And then like actually they're quite easy for humans too. And so that's the challenging thing. And so we're following the space. We're like iterating on prompts every day. We're like trying to see if there's like smart things we can do around fine tuning. But honestly, I'm just super excited. It's so obvious that in 2 years from now, like debugging will be 80-90% AI powered.
That'll be super cool. That'll be amazing. Dani, that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much for coming. Before you go, have you got one takeaway for founders listening that you've learned on your journey?
Absolutely. I think one non-obvious thing that we've learned that I think every founder should know is that there's old startup advice out there, which is like, be embarrassed by your first product, ship buggy, duct tape stuff together. And I think that 15 years ago was like excellent advice, but in the 2020s where we have mobile and remote, we all rely on software. Actually, things have to be pretty darn good for people to use it. One of the biggest unlocks for us early on is when we decided to stop shipping bugs and start being really production quality, even before like product market fit. And just as the exercise, like suddenly it changed the nature of the user feedback we were getting. We got a lot more clarity. It was awesome. But before we go, I love meeting our users. They're all building such awesome things, and I love hearing their take and their ideas and suggestions. So if you're using Jam, and if you're not, go to Jam.dev, go give it a try. I'd love to hear from you. I'm Dani at Jam.dev.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dani. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you again next week.